When people tell you a marriage falls apart all at once, don't believe them. It usually happens like a house taking on water in a storm. Quiet at first, a drip under the sink, a stain on the ceiling, one warped floorboard. Then one day, you step into the kitchen and realize the whole place is soaked through. That was how it happened to Nora Whitaker. If you'd seen her on a Tuesday morning, you would have thought she was fine. She packed lunches with one hand, tied her 6-year-old son's sneaker with the other, and balanced a coffee mug on the counter, while her daughter argued with a hairbrush like it had personally offended her. She laughed. She reminded. She moved through the kitchen like someone who had learned how to keep life running, even when it wanted to fall apart. She was 36, worked part-time editing copy for a small marketing firm in Columbus, Ohio, and had the kind of face that looked open even when she was exhausted. Her husband, Ethan, used to say she had kind eyes, which was sweet until he stopped looking into them. They had been married 11 years, not movie marriage happy, real marriage happy, mortgage happy, carpool happy, leftovers happy, the kind of happy built on folding laundry together while watching bad true crime and arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Then life got sharp. Ethan's construction business hit a rough year. Nora's mother got sick in Indiana. Their son, Milo, started having panic attacks at school. Their daughter, June, developed a habit of asking questions no parent wanted to answer, like, "Are you and Dad mad all the time now, or just when I'm awake?" That one landed like a punch. So Nora suggested marriage counseling. At first, Ethan resisted the way a lot of men resist anything that sounds like talking about feelings in a room with framed degrees on the wall. But after one ugly fight in the driveway, neighbors pretending not to listen while absolutely listening, he gave in. That was how they met Dr. Celeste Rowan. She had a soft voice, expensive boots, and an office designed to make you trust her before she even spoke. Warm lamplight, neutral art, one knitted blanket draped over a chair like healing itself, had a home decor budget. She was in her early 40s, beautiful in a polished, strategic way, not flashy, controlled. The kind of woman who knew that if she held eye contact half a second longer than normal, people filled in the silence with secrets. "You're both here," she said in their first session, smiling as if that alone was a miracle. "That tells me there's still love in this room." Nora almost cried right then. Ethan relaxed too. For the first time in months, she saw him look hopeful. Maybe that should have scared her, because Celeste didn't start by dividing them. She started by understanding them. She asked Ethan about the pressure of being a provider. She asked Nora about emotional labor, about what it meant to be the one remembering everyone's birthdays, dentist appointments, favorite cereals, fears, medications, and emotional weather. She made each of them feel seen. And then, little by little, she started making sure they were seen separately. "I think Ethan needs individual support around stress," she said after their fourth session. "I think Nora needs space to regulate outside the marriage dynamic," she said after the sixth. It sounded professional, thoughtful even. Then came the texts. At first, they were harmless. Reminders. "Don't forget to breathe today. Proud of the work you did in session. Here's that article I mentioned." Then Ethan started checking his phone face down. Then he changed the password. Then he started showering before dinner instead of after the gym, as if he needed to wash off more than sweat. Nora noticed, because wives notice, not because they're paranoid, because they are historians. They know the rhythm of a person's footsteps in a hallway. They know what brand of silence means exhaustion and what brand means guilt. One Friday night, she was loading the dishwasher when Ethan walked in, wearing cologne for no reason. "Where are you going?" she asked. He opened the fridge like that had been the plan all along. "Out." "Out where?" "With friends." "You hate vague men," Nora said, trying to make it a joke. "You become one for a week and suddenly you're in a cologne commercial." He shut the fridge harder than necessary. "Can you not do this tonight?" "Do what?" "This. Interrogate." Her throat tightened. "I asked where you were going, and I said out." June, sitting at the table coloring a horse purple, looked up and said, "That's not an answer, Dad." Nora would remember later that Ethan laughed at that. Actually, laughed. Then left without kissing any of them goodbye. That night, Nora didn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the furnace click on and off, turning cold fear over in her chest like a stone. At 2:13 a.m., Ethan came home, smelling like cedar and wine. Not like a bar, like a place where someone had chosen the candle scent on purpose. The next week, Celeste suggested they pause joint sessions. "I'm seeing a pattern," she told Nora in a solo appointment. "Your anxiety may be causing you to misinterpret Ethan's need for emotional distance." "Misinterpret?" Nora sat very still. "Are you saying I'm imagining this?" "No," Celeste said gently. "I'm saying when abandonment wounds are activated, the brain creates threat where there may only be discomfort." That was the first time Nora left therapy feeling smaller than when she arrived. Later that day, she asked Ethan, "Are you talking to Celeste outside of sessions?" He didn't even pretend not to know what she meant. "She checks in sometimes." "How often is sometimes?" He looked tired, irritated, like the victim of her question. "You always do this, Nora. You take one thing and turn it into a trial." "How often?" His silence answered her. Something inside her went cold. A week later, she found a receipt in his jeans pocket from a restaurant 40 minutes away, the kind with cloth napkins and no children's menu. On the back, in looping handwriting, someone had written, "You deserve peace. Don't let guilt trap you in the wrong life." For 3 full seconds, Nora couldn't breathe. Then she sat on the edge of the bathtub and laughed. Not because it was funny, because the human brain will sometimes hit a panic button so hard, it accidentally rings the comedy bell. "See?" she whispered to the empty bathroom. "Wow, real subtle. Dr. Philomena Doom." Then she cried so hard she had to bite a towel so the kids wouldn't hear. The confrontation came on a Sunday. Milo was building a blanket fort in the living room. June had declared herself Queen of Laundry Mountain from the clean pile on the couch. It should have been ordinary. Instead, it felt like the last scene before a house fire. Nora held out the receipt. Ethan looked at it, then at her. For a second, just a second, she saw shame. Then shame hardened into defensiveness. "You went through my clothes. You slept with our therapist?" The kids went still. Nora lowered her voice so fast it hurt. "Go upstairs, guys. Right now." June stood. Milo didn't. He looked between them with that terrified animal stare children get when they realize adults are just taller versions of chaos. "Go," Nora whispered. When they were gone, Ethan said, "It didn't start like that." Nora stared at him. "Oh, good. That clears it up." He rubbed both hands over his face. She understands me. She's billing you to understand you. You don't get it. No, Nora said, voice shaking. Actually, I get it perfectly. We trusted someone with the worst parts of our marriage, and she climbed into the wreckage and picked out what she wanted. It's not like that. Then tell me what it is. He looked at her with a kind of tragic certainty that made her want to throw something heavy. It's real, he said. What I feel for her is real. People think the worst part of betrayal is the lying. It isn't. It's the sincerity, the way someone can destroy you while speaking in a calm, honest voice. Nora's knees nearly buckled. And us? She asked. Were we real? He hesitated. That hesitation would haunt him later. At the time, it killed something in her. Within a month, he moved into the guest room, then into a short-term rental across town to clear his head. He still came by for the kids, but he moved through the house like a guest in a museum of a life he no longer wanted. Celeste had a plan for him. Nora could feel it even before she knew the details. He started saying strange things, rehearsed things. I need to prioritize emotional safety. I've spent years managing your instability. You create narratives. Nora wanted to scream. She had been married to Ethan for over a decade. He had never once used the phrase create narratives. The man still called quinoa fancy bird food. Then came the final blow. He sat across from her at the kitchen table one rainy Thursday while June practiced spelling words in the next room and said, Celeste and I are thinking about relocating. Nora actually blinked. Relocating? Yes. Like, to Target. He didn't smile. To North Carolina. Her laugh came out brittle. You're leaving your children for a therapist with a state map? That's not fair. Fair? She leaned in. She slept with a patient's husband. She didn't seduce me. I made choices. Terrible ones. His jaw tightened. You're proving her point. There it was. Nora sat back slowly. And what point is that? That once you feel abandoned, you get vindictive. She said you'd try to ruin my life when you realized I was serious. Nora stared at him so long he finally looked away. In that moment, something shifted. Pain stayed, but panic left. Because for the first time, this stopped feeling like a love story and started feeling like a script. And Nora had spent enough years editing copy to recognize when someone else had written the lines. The investigation began in the least cinematic place imaginable. A minivan in a grocery store parking lot. Nora had just cried in aisle 7 because a brand of crackers Ethan liked was on sale, and grief was apparently now available in snack form. She sat in the driver's seat with mascara under one eye and searched Celeste Rowan on her phone. License status. Active. Practice website. Polished. Psychology Today. Profile. Compassionate, insight-oriented, specializing in couples in transition. Instagram. Private. LinkedIn. Sparse. No husband. No kids. No obvious scandal. But Nora kept digging. Old office addresses. Previous states. A podcast appearance from 3 years earlier in Arizona. A conference panel in Tennessee. A community workshop in Nevada. The woman had moved a lot for someone whose entire profession was helping people build stability. Then Nora found a tiny thing, the kind most people would miss. On a cached local business listing from Phoenix, Celeste's practice had once been registered under a different surname, Rowan Mercer. Nora searched that, and up came a bankruptcy filing, then a divorce record, then a property transfer, then a civil complaint, sealed but not invisible. Her pulse started kicking. She printed everything at a FedEx office, while a college kid with a nose ring politely pretended not to notice that this suburban mother was building what looked very much like either a legal case or a revenge scrapbook. Over the next 3 weeks, Nora became the version of herself nobody had ever met. She waited until the kids were asleep, then sat at the dining room table under the yellow cone of the hanging light, laptop open, legal pads everywhere, cold coffee at her elbow. She searched public records, old social profiles, county assessor pages, campaign donation lists, archive newsletters, Venmo usernames, wedding websites that people forgot to delete. It was ridiculous what the internet would confess if you were patient. In Arizona, Celeste had counseled a couple who split abruptly. 6 months later, the husband liquidated a retirement account. He and Celeste left the state. Less than a year after that, he filed fraud allegations tied to a joint investment account that had vanished. Charges never stuck. He settled. She disappeared. In Tennessee, a man sold commercial property after falling in love during a period of therapeutic support following divorce. He moved with Celeste to Nevada. 2 years later, he was broke, hospitalized for depression, and telling his sister she'd convinced him everyone in his old life was toxic. In Nevada, another man, another move, another crash, always the same pattern. Therapeutic access, emotional dependence, isolation from family, urgent relocation, large transfer of funds, disappearance. Nora sat back from the table at 1:40 in the morning and whispered, "You evil little genius." Then, because she was still herself under all that hurt, she added, "Also, wow, get a hobby." The next step was harder. Records told one story. People told the truth under it. So Nora started reaching out. The first man didn't answer. The second sent one line. "Who gave you this number?" The third called at 10:17 p.m. His name was Grant Holloway, and he sounded like someone who had once shouted for help and eventually gotten tired of hearing his own voice echo. At first, he thought Nora was lying. Then she mentioned Celeste's office in Henderson, the fake LLC she used for consulting, the way she convinced men that anyone questioning her was abusive or unstable. Grant went quiet. Finally, he said, "You're not the first woman to call me crying." Nora gripped the phone so tightly her fingers hurt. "How many?" she asked. "Three before you. Wives, one ex-fiancé, and one daughter, different states, same woman." Nora closed her eyes. Grant told her everything. How Celeste studied people professionally and weaponized what she learned personally. How she mirrored exactly what a man needed to hear. With insecure men, she became admiration. With lonely men, she became rescue. With guilty men, she became absolution. She never pushed too fast. She nudged. She suggested. She made them believe every bad idea was their own brave act of self-liberation. "She doesn't just steal money," Grant said. "She steals reality." He had filed complaints years earlier, but by then he'd looked unstable, obsessed, vindictive. Celeste had notes, credentials, language. He had heartbreak and a half-finished bottle of bourbon. "By the time I understood what she'd done," he said, "I was explaining myself to people she'd already briefed against me." Nora swallowed. "My husband says I'm proving her point." Grant laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Yeah, she loves that move." Over the next 10 days, Nora spoke to 4 more people. 2 ex-husbands, a sister, one former colleague of Celeste's who wouldn't go on record but said enough to turn Nora's skin cold. "You didn't hear this from me," the colleague said. But there were ethics complaints in 2 states. Not enough for criminal charges, enough to make her leave before boards could get traction. Why wasn't she stopped? A long pause. Because smart predators don't sprint, they stroll. That night, Nora tucked Milo in, and he asked, "Is Dad mad at us?" She froze. Children don't ask the question they mean. They circle it because they're hoping you'll rescue them from the answer. "No, baby," she said, smoothing his hair. "Your dad loves you more than anything." "Then why doesn't he live here?" "There are some heartbreaks so pure they deserve silence around them." Nora kissed his forehead and said, "Because grown-ups can be very, very stupid when they're hurt." From the hallway, June whispered, "I heard that." "Good," Nora said, wiping her face. "Take notes for your future dating life." June, 9 years old and already funnier than most adults, said, "I'm marrying a dog." "Smart," Nora said. "Loyal, easy to train, loves snacks." For the first time in weeks, both kids laughed. Nora stood outside their room afterward and cried into the wall, where no one could see. The bank changed everything. Ethan came by on a Wednesday afternoon to pick up the kids for dinner. He was distracted, restless, checking his watch. He left his phone on the counter while helping Milo find a missing dinosaur backpack. Nora didn't touch it at first. Then it buzzed. "Make sure you get cash or cashier's check. We can't risk delay. Trust me." See, Nora went perfectly still. A second message followed. "Once we're in Asheville, all this noise disappears. She'll spiral. Let her. We start over clean." Nora stared at the screen. Not because she was surprised anymore, because it is one thing to suspect a person is trying to erase you. It is another to watch them say it in 12 casual words. She took photos with her own phone, set his down exactly as it had been. That evening, after the kids were asleep, she checked their joint banking portal. $48,000 had been withdrawn that day from an account they had once called the roof money, the emergency fund, the family safety net, the money they'd saved over years of canceled vacations, used furniture, and saying maybe next summer to things they wanted. Nora sat at the kitchen table with the bank app, glowing in the dark, and knew 2 things instantly. First, Ethan was about to destroy his life. Second, she finally had enough to stop it. She called Grant, then the Arizona ex-wife, then the colleague. By morning, she had a digital folder, a timeline, screenshots, property records, financial patterns, and corroborating statements. By noon, she had something else, a detective. Not because every betrayal becomes a police matter. Most don't. But financial exploitation does, fraud does, interstate patterns do. And when Nora showed the Columbus Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit what she had, especially the messages pushing secrecy, urgency, isolation, and transfer, they didn't laugh her out of the room. Detective Lena Torres was a compact woman with sharp eyes and the kind of calm that made you want to either confess or sit up straighter. "You did all this yourself?" she asked, flipping through the packet. Nora gave a tired smile. "Turns out Rage is a strong research assistant." Torres actually smirked. Then her face grew serious. "This is good work, very good. We can't promise what it becomes yet. But this pattern, this matters." Nora nodded, hands trembling in her lap. "My husband thinks he's in love." Torres looked at her for a long moment and said, "That doesn't mean he isn't also being manipulated." Nora didn't know whether that comforted her or made her angrier. Maybe both. The plan came together quickly. Ethan had agreed to meet Celeste Friday night at her townhouse with the money for the down payment on a house in Asheville. Celeste had told him she'd found a temporary route to avoid legal complications and delay. That alone made Detective Torres lift one brow so high it nearly left the building. With Ethan's cooperation, after Nora confronted him, they might be able to catch Celeste in the act. That after was the hard part, because first, Nora had to break the spell. She asked Ethan to come over Thursday night after the kids were in bed. He arrived irritated, already defensive, carrying the invisible armor of a man expecting accusation, and convinced it makes him innocent. "What now?" he asked, standing in the dining room. Nora had arranged everything on the table: folders, printouts, photos, statements, dates. It looked less like an ambush and more like an intervention staged by a librarian with a grudge. He frowned. "What is this?" "Your future," Nora said quietly. "If you don't sit down." Something in her voice must have reached him because he did. She didn't start with opinions. She started with facts. Phoenix, Henderson, Knoxville, Reno. She laid out names, property transfers, LLC registrations, complaints, bankruptcy records, relocations, statements from men who had once used phrases like, "She understands me and you're proving her point, and we just need a clean start." Ethan's face changed slowly. At first, annoyance, then disbelief, then anger. At Nora, because anger is easier than terror. "This could be anything," he said. "You've been stalking her. I called people who survived her. She told me you'd do something like this." "Yes," Nora snapped. "Because when a con artist sees a smoke alarm, she calls it unstable." He stood up. "I'm not doing this." "Sit down." He stared at her. Not the tired wife. Not the desperate wife. This was someone else. Someone with both feet planted in truth. He sat. Nora slid her phone across the table. On it were screenshots of Celeste's messages. Then an audio clip, Grant's voice. Then another from a woman in Tennessee whose husband had nearly lost everything. Then the sealed complaint summary one former attorney had quietly shared off record, enough to establish a pattern, even if not enough to prosecute alone. And finally, the thing that cracked him: a copy of a wire instruction email from one of Celeste's previous victims, with her old alias on it and the same exact phrasing she'd used with Ethan about avoiding delays and starting clean. Same structure, same urgency, same manipulation. Ethan read it once, then again. By the third time, his hand was shaking. "No," he said softly. Nora didn't move. "No," he repeated louder this time, as if volume could undo reality. Then he looked up at her, and for the first time in months, she saw Ethan, not the man inflated by fantasy, not the man coached into moral superiority, just a human being realizing he had walked to the edge of a cliff and called it destiny. "She said," his voice broke, "she said you'd fake evidence." Nora laughed once, a sharp, sad sound. "Of course she did." He pressed both palms to his forehead. "My God, there are moments when a person's whole self-image collapses in real time. It is not graceful." He started pacing. "I took money out," he said. "Jesus, Nora. I took the money out?" "I know." He stopped. "You knew. I know more than you think." He looked wrecked now, older. "Why are you helping me?" That question almost undid her, because she had asked herself the same thing all week. Why not let him burn? Why not let him lose everything and call it justice? Then she'd looked at her children, at Milo, sleeping with one sock half off, at June curled around a library book, and she'd known. Because whatever Ethan had done, She could not build their future on the rubble of his total destruction. Their children would breathe that smoke forever. So, Nora answered honestly, "Because you're still the father of my kids," she said, "and because I don't want them growing up thinking love means watching someone drown when you had a rope." Ethan sat back down and covered his face. When he cried, it was ugly and stunned and deeply human, not cinematic, real, the kind of crying that comes from shame reaching the bone. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Nora's own tears came then, hot and furious. "Do not ask me to forgive you tonight. I know. You looked at me like I was crazy. I know. You let another woman teach you how to mistrust me." He nodded without looking up. "And our children," Nora said, voice breaking now. "You were going to leave our children for a lie." At that, he made a sound she would remember for years. Not a word, the sound of a man finally hearing himself. Then she told him about Detective Torres, about the operation, about what he could do next. He stared at her, stunned. "You went to the police?" "Yes." "And they believe you?" "They believe patterns." He wiped his face. "What do you want me to do?" Nora looked at him for a long time. "Tell the truth," she said. "For once, all of it." Friday night came in cold and wet, the kind of spring rain that made every streetlight look like a memory. Ethan wore a wire. Even saying that would have seemed absurd to Nora a month earlier. Her husband, who once got flustered ordering at drive-thrus, was now part of a financial crime sting. Life had become so strange that normal no longer fit. He took the money, most of it in a cashier's check, part in cash, exactly as Celeste had instructed, and drove to her townhouse. Police were positioned out of sight. Detective Torres sat beside Nora in an unmarked SUV half a block away. "You don't have to watch," Torres said. Nora looked through the rain-blurred windshield. "Yes, I do." Inside the house, according to the live audio, Celeste was all warmth, soft praise, calm confidence. She told Ethan he was brave, that leaving dysfunctional patterns took courage, that Nora would lash out because disordered people cannot tolerate abandonment, that once he handed over the funds, she'd finalize the transfer, and they'd be free by morning. Free. Nora nearly laughed at the audacity of evil wrapped in therapy language. Then the audio shifted. Footsteps, cabinet doors, the rustle of paper. Celeste said, "Just leave the envelope there. Good, I've got a few things to pack tonight anyway." Torres glanced at another officer. Nora's heart slammed so hard she thought she might be sick. Because there it was. Not a romantic future, not a shared plan. A flea bag, one more state, one more man, one more life, stripped for parts. Ethan, to his credit, managed to ask, "Shouldn't we celebrate?" Celeste laughed lightly. "Tomorrow, tonight, let me handle logistics. You go home, keep your phone off, and do not engage with your wife no matter what she says. Control the narrative, isolate the asset, exit with funds." Textbook. He left 10 minutes later. Then the waiting began. An hour passed. At 12:43 a.m., movement. Celeste emerged from the back door wearing dark clothes, carrying 2 rolling suitcases and a leather tote. Even from a distance, she looked composed, like a woman heading to an airport lounge instead of running from a city with stolen money. Then the lights hit her. Officers moved in from both sides. One suitcase toppled over on the wet pavement. Celeste froze for half a second, then did something almost funny in its shamelessness. She smiled, actually smiled, as if she might still talk her way out of it with posture and vowels. Nora watched through the windshield, numb and trembling, while officers took the bags, secured her hands, and read her rights. Celeste turned her head once, scanning the street, not scared, calculating. Then her eyes landed on Ethan, standing near the curb under an umbrella with Detective Torres. Even from a distance, Nora saw the exact moment Celeste understood. Not that she'd been caught, that she had misjudged who had caught her. Not the police, the wife, the unstable woman, the one she had dismissed as too emotional, too domestic, too soft to matter. Nora stepped out of the SUV before anyone could stop her. Rain hit her face cold as glass. She didn't walk close enough to interfere, just close enough for Celeste to see her clearly. For one suspended second, the two women looked at each other. Celeste's expression sharpened. Nora expected rage, maybe fear. Instead, Celeste gave a tiny, almost admiring nod, like one chess player acknowledging the other's final move. Nora hated that nod more than she could explain, so she said the one thing that came to her. You should have picked a different family. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't polished, but it was true. And for the first time that night, Celeste's smile disappeared. The aftermath was messy, because real life always is. Investigations widened. Other states got involved. Victims were contacted. Complaints resurfaced. Celeste's license was suspended pending review, then shredded publicly in the press within weeks once details began to converge. There were headlines, there were interviews Nora refused. There were neighbors suddenly very invested in supporting her after months of watching from behind blinds. One of them brought over a lasagna so bad it could have counted as a second trauma. Still, the gesture was sweet. Ethan moved back into the house 2 months later, but not into their bedroom. That part mattered. Forgiveness is not the same thing as pretending. He slept in the guest room. He attended actual therapy with a male psychologist recommended by Detective Torres, of all people, who apparently believed in referrals the way some people believe in fate. He gave Nora access to everything: phone, finances, email, calendar, that weird cloud password nobody ever remembers until it matters. He apologized to the children in age-appropriate language, not the cheap version, the real one. I made choices that hurt this family, he told them one Sunday afternoon in the living room. What happened is not your fault, not even a little. Milo cried and asked if Dad was still leaving. No, Ethan said, crying too. No, I'm here. June folded her arms and said, You better be. Nora had to look away because that child had inherited her entire spine. The rebuilding took time. A lot of it. There were nights Nora couldn't bear him touching her shoulder. There were mornings she woke from dreams where he disappeared all over again. Sometimes she looked at him across the kitchen and saw both versions at once: the man who had held her hand through labor, and the man who had nearly handed their lives to a predator in an envelope. Love after betrayal is not soft. It is work boots in mud. It is choosing and choosing again, while angry and tired and unconvinced. But slowly, things changed. Ethan stopped performing insight and started practicing it. He listened more than he defended. He stopped saying things like, I was manipulated, without also saying, and I betrayed you. Nora, for her part, stopped pretending she was fine when she wasn't. She stopped editing her pain into something easier for other people to digest. She learned that forgiveness did not require amnesia, and that some marriages are not restored by going backward, but by building something humbler and truer from the wreckage. One evening in late fall, after the kids were asleep, they sat on the back porch under a blanket, drinking cheap red wine from mismatched mugs because the nice glasses had all somehow vanished over the years. The air smelled like leaves and chimney smoke. Ethan looked out into the yard and said, "I still don't understand how I believed her." Nora stared at the dark shape of the swing set. "Because she was a professional," she said, "and because she didn't start with your greed. She started with your pain." He swallowed hard. "I thought she was the only person who saw me." Nora turned to him then. "That's the part that hurt most," she said quietly. "I was standing right here." He closed his eyes. "I know." They sat in silence for a while. Then Nora said, "You know the sickest part?" "What?" "She technically helped our marriage." He blinked at her. Nora took a sip of wine. "Not in the way therapists usually brag about. More in the accidentally exposed every weak spot, every lie, every unspoken need, and forced us to either rot or rebuild kind of way." To her surprise, Ethan laughed. A broken laugh, but real. "She was like the world's most unethical marriage retreat." Nora snorted into her mug. "Brochure. Come for the emotional insight. Stay because your life is on fire." He laughed harder then, and so did she, until both of them were crying a little again, because sometimes grief and humor are cousins wearing each other's coats. Later that winter, he moved back into their room, not because the story was magically over, because trust had grown enough roots to hold weight again. The first night, they lay side by side in the dark for a long time. "Are we okay?" Ethan whispered. Nora answered the only honest way. "We're healing." That was better than okay, better than the old marriage in some ways, because this one had stopped worshiping appearances. It had been dragged through humiliation, temptation, shame, manipulation, and public ruin. And still, there they were, two bruised people under one roof, trying again. Years later, when friends asked how they survived it, Nora never gave the polished answer. She never said love won, because that sounded too simple, and because love by itself is not always enough. She said this: "We survived because the truth finally got louder than the fantasy." And sometimes, when she was feeling generous, she added, "And because I'm nosy, stubborn, and excellent with public records." That usually got a laugh, but the deeper truth lived underneath it. A marriage does not die the moment one person is tempted. It dies when lies are protected more fiercely than reality. And theirs, strange as it sounded, came back to life the night reality kicked down a back door in the rain and put handcuffs on the woman who had built a career out of studying broken hearts and slipping a knife between the cracks. In the end, Nora did forgive Ethan. Not quickly, not cheaply, not because he deserved instant peace, but because forgiveness, for her, was not permission. It was release. A decision not to let Celeste Rowan occupy permanent, rent-free space in the family she had tried to dismantle. Ethan never stopped being sorry. That mattered too. He became gentler with the children, more present, less certain of his own innocence, more committed to earning trust than requesting it. He learned that being loved for years can make a person arrogant if they mistake devotion for something automatic. He never made that mistake again. As for Nora, she discovered something strange and fierce inside herself. She had gone into that office months earlier hoping a therapist would save her marriage. Instead, when everything went wrong, she saved it herself. Not alone, exactly, But first, by noticing, by refusing gaslighting, by following the thread, by listening to the sick feeling in her gut when everyone else told her to doubt it, by becoming, when she had to, a detective in yoga pants with tear tracks on her cheeks and a printer full of receipts. There's a kind of woman the world underestimates every day. The woman holding snacks, schedules, school forms, and family secrets. The woman people assume is too overwhelmed to be dangerous, too emotional to be precise, too ordinary to be formidable. That was Celeste's fatal mistake. She thought Nora was just the wife. She never realized she was the witness. And the witness, in the right moment, is the one who changes everything.